Welcome to the next episode of the Think Wildlife podcast. In this episode, we return after a short break with a very special guest. Frans Schepers is the co founder and executive director of Rewilding Europe. It is the leading conservation organization across mainland Europe, which is working on the rewilding of various landscapes, including the reintroduction of mega herbivores and other keystone species such as wolves, bears, and Eurasian lynx. Tune in to listen more. Welcome, Francis. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast to talk about rewilding Europe.
Yes, nice to meet you. Thanks for inviting me for this podcast.
So, what inspired you to establish Rewilding Europe?
Well, that's a bit of a long story, but I've been working in conservation my whole life and always working to reduce damage and to reduce threats to nature, which is very intense. And we all know the reality. You don't win much. And then I discovered in many places where I went during my career that there's an incredible power in nature. So apart from just trying to stop losing nature, I felt like, why not work with nature to restore it? And so the whole idea about using the power and resilience of nature to bounce back, if we allow it to, became like the drive of what I wanted to do next. And that was, Rewilding Europe was a fantastic opportunity to do that, because in Europe, as you know and may know, we lost a lot of nature, and everyone is focusing on trying to protect it, and don't continue to losing nature. But at the same time, we also have an opportunity for bringing nature back to Europe, and this has to do with a number of developments that we see already happening for decades. And one of them is rural depopulation, so young people leaving the countryside, old generations stay behind, land is being abandoned, often marginal land that in the old days you could still earn a living, but in modern times you can't. Same time we saw wildlife come back, lots of the doing quite well. There is also, as people live more in urban areas, there is an interest in going out. And so nature-based tourism is on the rise, big time. So we saw these things being connected, and we felt this is a historic opportunity actually to start with something that will boost nature to come back across our continent. So that was that shared that a few bit of an incubation, the start of Rewilding Europe.
My second question for you is that what are the rewilding principles and how are you implementing them at Rewilding Europe?
Yeah, so we set up a number of principles that we felt should guide us, and just be aware there's no silver bullet or blueprint for rewilding that you can just apply in any continent or any country. So we went on a bit of a discovery path, if you like. How would rewilding work in a European context? It's not about protecting wilderness and creating wilderness. In Europe, of course, as many people know, the landscape is very much cultivated, it's human dominated, although there's less pressure on land, as I explained, and wildlife is coming back. So, the principles it starts actually with the definition of rewilding or what is rewilding. And as we say it's there's different ways, but a more popular version is allowing nature to restore itself, or unleashing the power of nature, or restoring functional ecosystems. So it's making nature work again, to both nature, of course, and biodiversity and so on, but also people. So the principles are very much it's quite holistic. It is using nature's power to build back and bring back nature to Europe. It's very much connected with communities, so it's important that people benefit. So the people's dimension to rewilding is very important. It includes making sure that you include the local history of a place. You cannot just forget about that. Of course, you build on everything that is there, including the local culture and the history of the place. And so we have set up this set of rewilding principles that we are applying. And of course, depending on the local context, whether it's sort of the ecological context or the geographical place or the cultural or socioeconomic context, that of course determines to a large extent how these principles express themselves in this particular landscape. And that's what we're doing in 10 big landscapes or places now across Europe.
What role does keystone species have in ecological restoration?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you start looking at a landscape and you look at, okay, what is the rewilding potential here or need, if you like, then of course you look at what are the key drivers of these ecosystems. So is that flooding, like in river systems? Is it erosion? Is it uh, natural grazing, the role of carnivores? So you look at how complete is this system, how much is the ecological functioning developed, and then of course you see in many places that we're actually dealing with degraded systems where a lot of things are missing. And of course, there's a key role for wildlife species that can influence landscapes, whether it's through grazing, whether it's through other ways. And so keystone species are those species that are more important than others because they influence landscapes. And those are the species that we would like to bring back because they will help us to rewild, right? So let's talk about large herbivores. So Europe used to have large herbivores before people came. It was full, what we know from Africa and places in India and other places in the world, full of large herbivores, wild horses, aurochs, European bison, lots of deer, you name it, kulan, Przewalski horses. That depends on how far you go back in time, but we had a lot of large herbivores that were working like landscape architects because they graze and they browse and they push trees. They can suppress vegetation and create a very dynamic and natural landscape. And when people came, a lot of those animals, disappeared. Some species even got extinct, like the auroch got extinct, and also the European wild horse. Or they became very low in densities. So their impact on the landscape basically disappeared. And a lot of that was replaced by domestic animals. So Europe used to have, when people came and started livestock grazing, I always say zillions of sheep and goat and horses and cows and what have you, donkeys that graced the landscape. So a lot of the landscapes actually in Europe were heavily overgrazed. If you look at old pictures from the Alps and the Pyrenees and the Apennines and other places, very bare mountains without any trees. But when this rural depopulation happened, the livestock grazing also decreased heavily. And so now you see that those places are these landscapes that I just mentioned. There's a lot of natural regeneration happening of forests. So forest is coming back big time in Europe. So you could say that the first time ever in Europe, we are missing large herbivores now. And so what we are doing with Rewilding Europe is bringing those large herbivores back to play that role again in these ecosystems, because, it's fantastic to have close canopy forest, but the natural landscape and the most, so diverse landscapes can only exist when megafauna and herbivores in particular are also part of it. So that's just an example of the role of a keystone species.
So, how does rewilding help tackle the climate crisis?
Well, there is two ways how rewilding can contribute, or actually a number of ways. But let me focus on two. Can help sort of tackle. It's maybe a big word, or maybe we could say help to mitigate and also the impact of climate change, which is already happening, as we all know, or adapt. One of them is, large-scale restoration of ecosystems, whether it's grasslands or peatlands or forests, of course, captures a lot of carbon. So a lot of people still think that the only way is a technical way of capturing carbon. Nature, of course, has proven for millions of years that that is the best technology we have. So if we restore peatlands, if we restore wetlands, if we protect and restore forest and all our ecosystems that capture carbon, that of course is really important. So that is a big contribution to reducing carbon in the atmosphere. That's one. The other one is on the adaptation side. So yes, there will be already an impact if we head towards 1.5 degrees temperature rise on average, which is of course more in certain places, like in the northern hemisphere and the Arctic and Antarctic. But if we're heading there, there will be impact already. So how can rewilding help to reduce floods, droughts, diseases, starvation of forest, you name it? And so we think that more resilient ecosystems, and that is exactly what rewilding is trying to achieve, that are not managed by people but that run on their own, when nature is the driving force behind, are much more resilient than non-natural systems. So if there is a disease outbreak in a forest, which is a plantation, that infestation can just go through the forest entirely. But if you have a diverse forest with different species of trees, different ages, that will never have such a big impact. So that's just one example. The other one is about, water and wetlands. We know there will be shortage of water and droughts in many, many places, including Europe, like our rivers. And of course, creating areas, wetland areas, restoring wetland areas will help us to save water and, for any of our purposes. And also, if we give space to rivers and there is flooding, we have lots of rainfall, intense rainfall nowadays as a result of climate change. Rivers that have a lot of space, can absorb and can deal with these type of high floods. So these are just a few examples that where rewilding or leading to more naturally functioning and resilient ecosystems can help us to mitigate and adapt to the changing climate.
So this year, a new nature restoration law was being discussed in the EU Parliament. Could you elaborate on this policy and its significance?
Yeah, so as everyone knows, the European Commission launched the European Green Deal now nearly 3 years ago. And there was a climate component and a nature component, to put it simple. The climate component, European climate law was accepted, and it brings legally binding targets to EU member states to contribute and make sure that we don't surpass the 1.5 degrees. So each country has to come with a plan, which is legally binding. So meaning that, they really have to deliver on this. For nature, let's say the second important component of the Green Deal, there's another one, which is the farm to fork strategy, which is on the agriculture. But the nature component is basically the biodiversity strategy for 2021 to 2030 is there, and it's a very good piece of work. It was presented by the European Commission, but it didn't have any legal dimension to it. So the European Commission rightfully said, looking at our previous biodiversity strategy, we actually didn't deliver on the targets. Actually, most of it was not achieved by the member states. If we want to restore nature at scale in Europe, apart from protecting it through what we already have, the Habitats and Birds Directive mainly, if we want to restore degraded lands in Europe, we also need to have legally binding targets. And that is what the EU Nature Restoration Law is about. So it's a legal backing of the biodiversity strategy and the targets that are being set within the European Green Deal. And there's a big discussion about it because, I think most of us see that we need a change here, whether it's the use of pesticide or the intensification of agriculture, the way we produce our food. We need to restore big time in Europe. And this is where rewilding comes in, because rewilding is very cost effective, because it's not people that are restoring everything. We actually create the conditions, as I said in the beginning, for nature to restore itself. So it's very cost effective, because even if you have to do initial interventions like creating more space for rivers, put peatlands on the water again, or bring species back, or some of the other things I mentioned, that will cost some money, but it is these are one-off interventions, because what you want next is that nature then starts restoring itself with these new conditions. And actually, a lot of things that now cost money, you can stop doing. The intense management of systems. If you want systems to become more natural, you should also stop, managing them very actively. So we believe that rewilding is a very cost-effective and efficient way of restoring nature at scale. And this EU Nature Restoration Law will be an important tool to support this type of work. And so we are very eager, of course, to make sure that this EU restoration law will be voted positively and accepted in European Parliament ultimately, which will happen in July. So, in July, summer 2023.
So what are some obstacles facing the passing of the law and the implementation of similar laws?
Well, the obstacle, and this is where the political discussion and debates are about, is about, are we going to continue in the traditional way with our food production, in particular, using pesticides, just intensifying, the small farmers are losing out, the big farms get the big money, and leading to all these problems of impact on climate, impact on biodiversity, and so on. And there's a lot of economic interest in the big agricultural sector, of course, of keeping things as they are. But we need change. And so the biggest lobby against this new restoration law comes from the food and agri sector, which is a shame because I think everyone can see that this is not a sustainable way of producing our food. We need systems change. And this EU restoration law, next to the other tools that the Commission has put together, will enable us to make that change. So there is strong opposition from those sectors, and that's what the discussion of the fight, if you like, is about now. It's about voters, it's about power, it's about money, it's about capital, it's about big companies and the industry that wants to keep the status quo, which I believe is not the way to go.
So, what are some other political and social challenges hindering the rewilding movement in Europe?
So some of the other challenges that we come across in sort of rewilding Europe and making rewilding mainstream in Europe is that maybe first it's more the psychology. I think because Europe is so cultivated, everyone believes that if we don't manage nature, it will go wrong. So if we don't cut and mow and prune and shoot and burn and whatever people do in nature, if we don't control it, it will go out of hand. And I think, we need a paradigm shift in thinking. We need to trust nature more. So there is this, call it psychological change that we need in the way we look at nature in Europe. And all the rewilding examples that are now being pursued and people are working on, and it's really mushrooming all across Europe, they are meant to demonstrate and show people, look, this is not dangerous, or it doesn't impact the food production or whatever. This is actually ensuring that we have clean air, clean water, that it supports human well-being. It gives economic opportunity. It gives these climate benefits. So there's many things that people are not aware of yet that I hope we can demonstrate. So the change in thinking is a big one, because that's where it really starts. Other challenges are more practical, like current policy environment is not yet sufficiently supportive for rewilding. We come across lots of barriers that, you can't do this, you can't do that, you have to do this, you have to do that, which is based on this old thinking that we need to control nature. So those are, I would say, two main challenges that we come across and that we are working on. And there's a few more, of course, but that's more maybe local, where there could be all sorts of challenges locally that we have to address. But overall, we see a lot of progress happening, and results and also impact starting to show up in our rewilding initiatives. Now 10 landscapes across Europe. And our latest annual review that was just published in June gives lots of stories where
Various top predators are returning to Europe's landscapes. So, what has been the broad ecological impact of reviving wolf, bear, and lynx populations across Europe?
Yeah, so we see a comeback of large carnivores already for decades, I have to say. So we talk about brown bear, grey wolf, Eurasian lynx, Iberian lynx, but also wolverine, and even some of the medium-sized carnivores like golden jackal. And these are coming back because of better protection, mostly. You're not allowed to shoot these animals or poach them or whatever. So better protection has made a big difference. So they're spreading across Europe again. And this is very unique, because I don't know any other continent that has this increase in numbers, but also range expansion, like we have in Europe of nearly all, or basically all the large carnivores. Of course, I know the example of the tigers in India, but in general, if you look at Africa, North America, it's there's not a lot, it's not comparable to what's happening in Europe. So that's really positive news. And there's different ideas about how they impact the landscape. And, there's being studies are being done on it. Of course, many people know the story about the wolves in Yellowstone and how they change rivers. Those were actively reintroduced in Yellowstone. In Europe, we have natural expansion. The only species that are being reintroduced in some locations are Eurasian lynx and Iberian lynx. All the other species are not reintroduced. And there was a former reintroduction of brown bears in the Pyrenees, but that's basically it. All of it is natural expansion. And we know, apart from predation, that there's other roles that these large carnivores play in nature. For instance, the impact on the behavior of their prey, like wolves feeding on red deer. So big herds of red deer, grazing calmly in an open place or in the forest. That has changed. They split up in smaller groups. They're much more skittish. They have less reproduction because a lot of energy goes into the running away for wolves. And so there is all these other effects that we are just starting to see, really, in particular of the wolf. I think that's the most impactful species. But of course, the others also have an impact in terms of predation, but also this what we call ecology of fear type of behavior that changes the way landscapes are being grazed. So apart from the fact that you have these grazers that have an impact, if you also have on top of that carnivores that influence the behavior of those grazers, of course you can imagine this brings another dimension to the natural process that you see as a result of that. So the impact is there, definitely, but it's hard to sort of give a simple one-liner on what that impact is. But the types of impact are clear, and to what extent it really changes landscapes, that, of course, is something that takes a lot of time. And there are studies ongoing to look at this. Some people say in human-dominated landscapes like Europe, you don't see so much effect. Others doubt that again. So, yeah, I think future research will help us to learn more.
So why have the mega carnivores of Europe been recovering so successfully?
The main reason why large carnivores are recovering successfully is legal protection. So we have the Habitats and Birds Directive. So it's not only the large carnivores, but also you see a lot of, big bird species and predator birds, raptors. They're also increasing. In fact, we did a study now 2 times in 2013 and 2022 with the Zoological Society of London and BirdLife, and we looked at the success factors of 100 species. We finally ended up with 50 because we didn't have data sufficiently for all of them, but for 50 species we described and analyzed the reasons for their comeback. So legal protection through the Habitats and Birds Directive is number one, because that affects, of course, the protection status at national level as well, because EU member states have to comply with EU laws. The other one is very much dedicated species conservation work, reintroductions, habitat protection, and so on. And there's another important factor, that's the hunting policy. So some species at some point in some countries were forbidden to be hunted, and that allowed their recovery. And I'm talking about, for instance, Arctic geese species, like the barnacle geese, huge increase of barnacle geese that winter in Europe because they were not allowed to be hunted anymore. So there's different reasons, but the common reason is really those, dedicated conservation work, legal protection, and also habitat restoration in a number of ways. And some species were nearly at the brink of extinction, and the main 2 ones are the Iberian lynx, which at some point in the early 2000s had only like 25 breeding females left in Spain. Now there's over 2,000 again, huge efforts. So the Iberian lynx is recovering. And the other very famous species that maybe not many people know about is the European bison, which were down to 52 only in zoos. So it got extinct into the wild. And through efforts of nearly 100 years now in Europe, starting in Poland in 1927, I think it was, breeding in captivity and releasing in places in the landscape again. And now we are up to, I think, around 8,000 European bison. Not all roaming free, but a huge success, I would say, for this largest herbivore, largest mammal that we have in Europe.
What have been the implications of rewilding predators on local communities in terms of human-wildlife conflict and other social impacts?
Yeah, you can imagine that in landscapes or areas or regions where people used to live with these large carnivores in particular, they had their ways. They had shepherd dogs. They knew you have to bring the sheep at night into a corral. And they also were used to the fact that they would lose certain percentage of their animals every year because of predation by wolves in particular. So that was like common sense, common practice, more or less. But you can imagine if countries that didn't have wolves for 200 years or longer, and the species is now sort of entering their country, and I speak about my home country, the Netherlands, where we now have, I think, around 30, 35 wolves in our small country. It takes a lot of effort to get used again to live, side by side with this animal and find ways to coexist. So I would say coexistence, is a key challenge and maybe also opportunity for Europe and Europeans to have their iconic wildlife back in their backyard, if you like. And that is not only with the large carnivores, that it's the same with beavers, with deer, with eagles, you name it, vultures. All of these species, because we're talking about predators, scavengers, herbivores, they all have an impact. And, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, or for a long time, people just wanted to get rid of these animals because they were a nuisance. But I think, and I also hope that we, civilized a little bit, and that we are not going back to those days that we just want to eradicate and poison and shoot and poach these beautiful animals, but that we try and find a way to live in coexistence. And this is not only about reducing human-wildlife conflicts, it's also about having benefits from the presence of these animals. So things like wildlife photography, wildlife tourism are on the rise in Europe. And so that brings a business case for many rural areas. If you have these animals, it's not just trying to live next to them and have as less problems as possible. It's actually more positive. How can you build a local economy based on wildlife watching? As we know from other parts of the world, Europe has maybe 18,000 brown bears. You don't need to go to North America or Canada to see brown bears. You can see them in Europe. And there's already places in Europe where people are really benefiting and where businesses are built local economies around iconic wildlife species. So this is something we have to work on. It's not something that happens overnight, and there will always be people who don't like it. But I think that looking at the net result of wildlife comeback in Europe, which is happening as we speak, many species are returning, expanding their range. It's a positive story, which basically tells us that, again, as I started in the beginning, if you allow nature to bounce back, it will. And wildlife is, depending on the species, of course, is a great example of that, the wildlife comeback in Europe that we see happening over the last 30, 40 years.
So I know the UK is not a part of the EU anymore, but there's been a lot of controversy with rewilding predators in the United Kingdom. So
A lot about controversy about what?
the controversy about rewilding predators to the UK, like wolves and lynx. So do you think that it is possible to see wolves and lynx return to the UK in the foreseeable future?
Well, one of the exceptions of wildlife comeback is the United Kingdom, because it's a big island, right? There is no land bridge between mainland Europe and the UK. If there would have been, I'm sure there were already wolves and other species would have come back to the UK. So anything in terms of wildlife comeback has to be brought there actively. And there have been discussions about various species. Wolves is one of them, lynx is one of them, bison. And actually, the first reintroduction of bison has happened. I think lynx will also happen at some point. Wolf is a different story. The lynx discussions and feasibility studies and research and knowledge is actually growing fast. And we hope that within a few years' time, there will be lynx reintroductions happening in the UK. And of course, like in the Netherlands or Denmark or Belgium, where species are coming back for the UK, it's the same challenge. How can you find ways to not only coexist with these animals, but also benefit from them? And the lynx is actually a very shy animal. I haven't seen a lynx, I have to admit, in my entire life, working so much in Europe. It's very hard to see them, leave alone, to see their impact. They hunt on roe deer, small prey. Very unlikely they take a sheep. And if it would be one, it would be very rare. And we know that from many places across Europe. So the lynx is actually a fairly easy species to bring back also to the UK. It's very much, again, the paradigm shift in thinking and, the feeling of losing control, the feeling of trying to get rid of animals that could or might become a nuisance and maybe not are. So there's a lot of work to be done. Yeah, I think wolves will be a difficult one for the UK. Let's focus on the lynx first. Wildcat is happening now, reintroductions and breedings. Of course, that's a small predator. And live with the other ones that are already there, like otters and beavers. And there's lots of challenges in the UK to even coexist with the more ordinary species. I think that's the view I can give you from mainland Europe on the UK.
You spoke a lot about how rewilding can support local economies. So, what is Rewilding Europe doing to integrate rewilding into the economy?
In all of our landscapes, we work on wilder nature, and that is around rewilding land, bringing back species, reflooding, re-wetting, dam removal, you name it, all these natural regeneration, all these things that sort of the natural processes and creating wilder nature. That's one big piece of work. The other piece of work is about people, because rewilding is 90% about people and 10% about nature. Because if you, as I said, and as I explained, if you allow nature to bounce back, it will. So that's the easy part, I would say. So it's a psychology and working with the people in the region that is taking most of our efforts. And it is a core element. So benefits for people is a core element. Nature for people is a core element of Rewilding Europe's work. And we do this in a number of ways. On the more economic side, we're looking at how can we create landscape business plans that brings together all the businesses and business ideas to create this new nature-based economy connected to rewilding, wild nature, and the natural assets that such landscapes have. So we provide technical expertise, help entrepreneurs with business plans, provide finance through loans. We help with sales, and so that they don't work in isolation, together product for the region, which in turn provides incentives for people to appreciate nature and wildlife around them. That's the benefit side, of course, that we're looking for. So that's more, and that will bring jobs, income, visitors around nature. So this is something that is key here. But there's also other sectors apart from tourism that we can work with and where we could develop business models. For instance, on rewilding forests, we are pioneering new business models around transforming plantations into more natural forests, which could be very useful in areas where there's a lot of plantations which are easy to burn, like in Portugal, eucalyptus and pine tree plantations. How can we transform them into natural oak forests that should be there, in fact? And then there's private estates, there is business models around wildlife management that we are exploring. So there's a lot of economic opportunity connected to rewilding. And then there is also what we call the wider benefits. Those are the benefits, for instance, yes, this is about well-being. This is also about pride and identity of regions and landscapes that were suffering from land abandonment, economic downturn, young people leaving, public facilities being closed, like the library, shops, transport, you name it. And what we see now, starting in some of our landscape, is that young people that leave a region where they were born and grew up to go and study in a big city, a capital of the country, can turn back because they still might have a house of their parents or a bit of land, but they don't come back as a farmer. They come back, educated, maybe as an MBA or being able to do an online business. If you have good internet connection, you can actually work quite nicely from the countryside and build a life there and grow your own vegetables. And so there's a lot happening on that side as well. So the people's component is extremely important because we want these to become living landscapes where there's a thriving economy, but not the old school thinking, but a new, call it regenerative economy that is nature based and which makes people appreciate the values that are there instead of intensifying land use again in these marginal places where there is actually that huge opportunity of building more natural landscapes, developing more natural landscapes and climate resilience instead of intensive monocultures of crops or trees. So that's the main sort of people component, both economic and let's say the more soft benefits it can bring.
So could you also talk about the Rewilding Europe Capital project?
So one of the opportunities, as I said, that we have is to provide loans to entrepreneurs. So we have support from a number of donors, but also including the European Investment Bank, where we provide loans for those enterprises that have a rewilding connection. So it could be something like accommodation or a tourism guide, nature tourism guide operation or anything else. So that loan facility is helping those local entrepreneurs that can often it's hard for them to access finance, and we provide attractive sort of soft loans for them to start their business. But it's a repayable loan, so they have to pay back the loan, and a part of the money that they benefit from will also go to the Rewilding initiative. So we make a direct connection between the enterprise and the rewilding happening through a rewilding levy. So that's basically our loan facility. There is now 6.5 million in this facility, and we have over 30 loans already provided. Some of them already are paid back, others are still running, and there's new ones coming. So this is an interesting way of supporting local business.
So now moving towards Rewilding Europe as a whole. So what are some of the most exciting projects upcoming as a part of Rewilding Europe?
So what we've done, we now exist 12 years. And when we were 10 years, we sort of looked back and also forward, and we asked ourselves the question, where would we like to be by 2030? And so we developed a new strategy for 2030, and that's what we are now, that's what we're now working on. Everyone in the central team, which is based here in the Netherlands largely, and also the 10 landscape teams. So there's actually two big components of our work. One is demonstration of how rewilding works, the benefits it brings. So that's what we do in our landscapes with all our landscape teams. And we now have 10 landscapes, and that will grow to 15. And number 11 is in the pipeline, will be in France if everything goes well. But in the other additional landscapes, we also want to see if we can start marine and coastal rewilding, sea wilding, if you like. So that will be exciting, new initiative. So we want to start going into the marine component here. That's, I think, very exciting. We've just started a new initiative called European Wildlife Comeback Fund, which is a dedicated fund to push and increase reintroductions in a very practical way across Europe. So anyone can apply. And we already supported by now, I think, around 12 or 13 different reintroductions, ranging from big animals to very small animals, insects even. So really to push the wildlife comeback even more. So that's really exciting. And so that's the demonstration role. And then we have the upscaling role, because these landscapes are meant to be, and are already, inspirational examples of what can happen at a much larger scale. So the upscaling component is something we are working on now much more than we did in the first 10 years. So we have an upscaling team, and we really want to see how we can make others adopt and work with rewilding. And we have a number of different ways for that. We have the European Rewilding Network, where any rewilding initiative can become a member and exchange experience. Now we have 90 members across 28 European countries, and that will grow. So that's exciting. We just started European Young Rewilders, an initiative that we incubated already 2 years ago, but now with more dedicated staff and power, really mobilizing and bringing together young professionals, young people in Europe that like to embrace rewilding, which is also very exciting. And maybe as a last example of what we have just started or are starting now is a company called Rewilding Climate Solutions, where we want to see how rewilding can become a commercially interesting activity. And this is mainly done through carbon credit financing. And there's a few other things and ideas that we're working on, but these three are the European Wildlife Comeback Fund, the European Young Rewilders, and Rewilding Climate Solutions. I think are three very exciting new initiatives within Rewilding Europe that are really meant to upscale our work across Europe and outside and beyond our own landscapes.
So, ever since the inception of Rewilding Europe, what have been some of your biggest challenges?
Of course, if you start a new initiative like this, although we were all very experienced, the people that were the founders, it's you never know where this is going to go, of course. And when we started, we had this big vision and this big idea, and I think that's part of our success is that people felt attracted to the big idea. But of course, you also make a promise, and if people support you with their funding, of course, it gives you a big responsibility to make it happen, and you don't know if that is going to succeed. But I think we have been growing very strong, and I think we are on a very nice path to become bigger, not in terms of organization, but in terms of rewilding happening out there. And of course, you have to overcome lots of challenges because it's a new way of thinking. I already mentioned that before. Fundraising, finding the money to make it possible what you want to do. That is going better and better. There's a lot of interest from private sector, from corporates, from private foundations, individuals that want to support our work. Also, because we're able to now show results and start of impact. So that is something that people really look for. The talking is enough. We need to act. I think that's the blah, blah, blah remark that Greta Thunberg once made. We are typically an organization that wants to do things on the ground. So we're very much a practitioner of this idea of rewilding. And of course, being a practitioner brings challenges because, not everyone is ready for it or does understand it. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it is being done to overcome those challenges. We talked already about the policy side. I think if we would have more enabling policy environment in terms of legislation for rewilding, that would tremendously help. Maybe not so much anymore at the European level or EU level, but at the country level, there's a lot of work to be done. And I think those are some of our main challenges. So change of attitude, how we see nature, making sure sufficient financial means make our work possible, a policy environment that supports rewilding, and maybe another one which is connected to what I earlier explained about rewilding climate solutions. I really think that if we want to scale up rewilding, the private sector has to come in big time, because only philanthropy and public funding will not make the difference ultimately. We need it all. We're very much supporting a blended finance sort of system, but the private sector, driven by their shareholders or by ESG policy or becoming nature positive, can do a whole lot. And we see that interest in the corporate sector really increasing a lot. And we are working with a number of new partners, big corporates that want to join our initiative. So that's positive.
And how can individuals join the rewilding movement?
As an individual, there is a lot of things you can do, and that's apart from following us, make a donation. I think promoting rewilding through sharing articles and through social media the beauty of rewilding is you can rewild your own garden, you can rewild your city park, so you can become active yourself in rewilding and start rewilding initiatives. Of course, you can also visit our landscapes. If people would like to go on holiday, they are very welcome to book their holidays to our areas. We have Rewilding Europe Travel, our main tourism partner that offers interesting itineraries where you can see and learn about these rewilding landscapes. And if people who are already practicing rewilding, they can join the Rewilding Europe network, so European Rewilding Network. So there's lots of things you can do, and I think that's what people like a lot. It's very actionable, and as I said, from your own backyard to being part of something bigger, or share the news and follow us, or make a contribution with a donation, or become a partner. Companies, organizations, private individuals can become a partner and join us and support us maybe more substantially if they are able to and willing.
And my final question for you is that across your conservation career, what has been your biggest learning?
The biggest learning in my conservation career?
Yep.
Well, the biggest learning in my conservation career has to do with what I call moving from this anxiety narrative to what we call an empowerment narrative. And the anxiety narrative is that nature is weak, we have to help it, it depends on us, and if we don't save it today, it will disappear tomorrow. So there is this marketing drive of sense of urgency and collecting money to hold the decline, right? That you see a lot, and I called it the anxiety narrative. All the the stories that you get every day about how bad things are going, and I think people get tired of it, and maybe people start to ignore it because you can hardly imagine and process some of that negative news. I think the biggest learning is that if you turn that into what I call an empowerment narrative, where you communicate positive messages, that you communicate hope and perspective, and also action that you can be part of, that is much more energizing for people. People like to be part of a winning team, not a losing team, I always say. And working with nature as an ally is hugely energizing and positive. If you see the success of a species returning, or you see a beautiful meadow flowering again, or if you see a river that was just where the dams were just removed, you see it flowing free again. This is incredible, and I think that's what people like about rewilding. It's very, very much a story of hope, and there is a perspective of being able to do something, and that transition from in my early career, the first 2 decades, if you like, to now is I think the biggest learning, or maybe it's not a learning, it's more what happened to me, and I realized really that following this more positive, empowering narrative mobilizes, I think, in the end, much more people than the doom and gloom stories that we hear every day. So maybe that's what I could give you as my best example here.
So yeah, that's a positive way to end the interview. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Think Wildlife podcast. If you did, don't forget to subscribe and share.